Hi, my name is Jennifer Anderson, and I am a student at Western New England University, and I am a second year occupational therapy student. And today I'm here to talk about adaptive equipment for low vision or blindness related to feeding. So, to get right into it, as someone that works with adaptive equipment or maybe a therapist, we all probably know what low vision or blindness is, but just to kind of break it down, low vision is a variety of conditions, and this can go from macular degeneration, glaucoma, diabetic retinopathy, so age-related conditions, or it can be another one like visual processing skill impairments, and different things such as spatial perception, object perception, visual discrimination, visual memory, or other ones. And this is something that can be in a range of ages. You can be born with it, you might develop it as you get a little older, and so this kind of shows that there can be a huge range of people with vision impairments. And then the other one is legal blindness. So legal blindness is a visual acuity between 2100 and 2200 and a field of vision that is less than 20 degrees. So what is the occupation of feeding? As an occupational therapy student, all we talk about is activities of daily living and occupations, and feeding is an activity of daily living. And so there's different types of feeding. You might have assistants being fed, or you might be able to self-feed. So just to break down the difference, feeding is the process of bringing the food to your mouth. And then self-feeding is more specific, where you're able to set up, arrange, and bring the food or the liquid from the plate or cup to your mouth independently. And so if you do have a low vision impairment or blindness, this is going to impact your self-feeding. And you might deal with something like contrast issues, being able to lift the food from the plate and find where to bring it to your mouth, or the ability to just discriminate the food itself. So what are basic tips we can help with? High contrast. This can be a huge game changer to help with somebody maybe meal prepping. So for example, you can buy a two color sided cutting board. And if you're going to cut, say, a white onion, you wouldn't want to do that on the white side of the cutting board. You would want to flip it and use the black one like you see right here. And then that way, when you put the white onion down, that high contrast difference is there, and you'll be able to see where to cut versus on a white side or a glass one, you're not going to be able to find it as easily. And that brings me to my next tip with avoid glass. So if you have a drink in glass, or if there's a glass plate, someone with a vision impairment is going to struggle more on where the food is, how to find the food, or where the liquid is in the drink. And it just makes it harder to be able to visualize what the plate and cup is. And then another tip is to use the clock reference system. So what is the clock reference system? So you can put your food at 12 p.m., 3 p.m., 6 p.m., and then 9 p.m. And then that way, if someone knows, okay, my vegetables are at 3 p.m. and my steak is at 6 p.m., you'll be able to identify without having to sit there and maybe play with your fork and touch, or have to ask, like, what is this part again? And the last tip is utilize your other senses. And this is something that a lot of people are able to do if they have a impairment with one of their senses. So you can use your tactile senses or even your auditory. So if you're eating, you can use your fingers, or maybe you can use your fork, and you can play around. So if you're eating steak and potatoes, you're able to use your fork and you can feel, okay, that's definitely steak, and you're going to know the difference if you're putting your fork through potatoes. So a lot of just practice of using the things around you to process what you have for food. And then another thing is, if you're meal prepping, you can use braille or speech to text. And I am going to go into that a little bit, but you can find things with like maybe measuring cups, or when you fill a pitcher, it can say out loud like 1 liter. And then that way you're using your auditory senses to understand what you're doing while you're meal prepping. So here are some types of adaptive equipment that kind of led me to this. So I got this stuff from the Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired. And this is a website and a store, and it gives off like some information, some of my tips related to what they offered for tips. And so this is from their store of different equipment you can purchase. So you have the UGG glove, and this is 19.95, so about $20. And all it is a tough exterior layer of a glove. So when you're trying to reach something out of the oven, you don't have to worry about burning your hand because you can't see the rack as well. Or another thing is Braille measuring spoons. So then that way, if you're trying to bake maybe, and you want to figure out how much is 1 teaspoon versus a half teaspoon, you have the Braille right there to help you identify the difference and have that independence versus having to ask somebody. And then another one is a Braille long ring timer. So although someone who can see, you can just be like, okay, I'm going to turn it to 10 minutes. Somebody might need that Braille to be able to feel, and you're like, okay, this is going to be the timer at 10 minutes. And so all of these are relatively cheap. The measuring spoons, $15, the timer, $17.50. This is all relative to what you would pay for the standard. So here's some other ones that are offered. So you have the adjustable slicing guide, and this is $20. And all it is a built-in adjustable knife that helps you be able to cut things safely because it has a safety fork. So you don't have to worry about cutting your fingers or hurting yourself in any way trying to use a knife. And then another thing is a finger guard. And this protects your fingers while also using something sharp. And this is something incredible that I even want because it's so easy to be cutting something and then nick your hand. And it's $7.50, and it's just simple. You just put it right here in your hand. So when you cut, you don't hurt yourself. And then the last thing is a push-pull oven ruler. And this allows you to pull out the oven racks as well. And there's a magnet on it, so you can put it right on the fridge or somewhere very close. So when you need it, you just grab it, open it, and put it back. So it's easy to store. So what is a therapist's role with feeding? This is something that is very crucial for someone who maybe gives adaptive equipment or an OT or some type of therapist to understand. So the biggest thing is for occupational therapists is to educate. And it's important to not only educate your client, but to keep continuing your education for yourself. If you got educated 10 years ago on visual impairments and things you can use, 10 years later, it's going to be so different. So it's so crucial to continue your education and learn about what's more out there, especially with assistive devices and technology, since it's continuously advancing. And then you also want to practice. So with a client, if someone has a visual impairment, you might want to do some assessments first to see necessarily what you're working with. And then you might want to do some dry runs and then some simulations. So then when they are on their own and they are trying to self-feed, they've practiced enough and they have that sense of safety to be able to perform it correctly. And then last is to advocate. You might have to advocate to your insurance if they need some type of equipment that they can get through insurance. Or you may have to advocate to their job or their school to make sure that they have what they need to be able to eat. And then even lawmakers, we as clinicians, it's crucial for us to advocate for our clients' needs and use our privilege of our profession to push for that. So how can you access this stuff? So there are many ways you can access these things, fortunately. I mean, everyone lives through Amazon now, and if you're a Prime member, you can get some of this stuff within 2 days. And there are so many assistive technology and adaptive equipment you can use for self-feeding. And where I showed the stuff previously, I got through the Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired, and there are many types of resources like this. And that is the grateful part of you having the internet. You can look up this stuff, and there's just so much stuff out there. And there's also adaptive equipment facilities such as the NEAT Center. And this is also a place you can go to, and they can assist you and they can find things that will help you be able to perform self-feeding safely and proficiently. So I decided to do a SWOT analysis on just the things out there for assistive technology or adaptive equipment for self-feeding for people who are visually blind. So there's a lot of strengths. There's lots of adaptive equipment out there. Like I was just saying, you can find it all over Google, or if you go somewhere, there's going to be something that's out there for someone. And there's great interprofessional practice to build a strong support team for an individual. So before, this was a child at the Perkins School for the Blind, and he would have his occupational therapist, he would have his parents, his teachers, his doctor, his physical therapist, his entire team can work together to create a perfect plan. And where an occupational therapist comes involved, we could help with self-feeding and advocate for his needs in that way. And you can work together to create the best treatment plan for that individual. And then there's also just a huge population. So it's already pretty inclusive for people. And there's a lot out there because it is such a huge population of people with low vision or blindness. So what are some weaknesses? There's just not enough education for people who don't experience low vision or blindness. I personally didn't even know how much was out there until I started researching it. And that's why it's so crucial that we advocate. And that leads to the next weakness. There's just not an advocacy for the resources out there. You don't see when you go everywhere, like all these resources for people for specifically with low vision problems. It's always just for the typical person. And so this kind of leads to opportunities. So we as clinicians want to advocate for the population and we want to educate people. And you can provide this for people with low vision or blindness. Like they can self-feed. They don't need help for everything. They can have that self-independence and self-efficacy to eat. And this also would give the opportunity just to improve the quality of life for people with low vision. This would be so crucial to help them, like I just said, have that sense of independence. And if they have that self-independence, that will improve their quality of life because they can do it themselves and they don't have to ask for help and they can just live life like they want to. And then just some threats is that there's a lack of education and this can lead to ignorance. Some people just, if people don't have that education, they might have different beliefs or they might just not understand what is out there for people. And then lastly, it's just the government funding and awareness. That's why as clinicians, it's so important for us to advocate and let everyone know what there is out there and push for our clients and make sure that we can help them get the best treatment as possible. So thank you so much for coming to my presentation. And I hope you all have learned a little bit more about self-feeding. Thank you.